My guests this week are Jeff and Stephen McDonald of Red Cross and the filmmaker of Born Innocent, the Red Cross Story, Andrew Reich. A band very close to my heart and record collection, Red Cross started in 1979 with two kids all hopped up on punk rock who started their own group in their hometown of Hawthorne, Los Angeles, the birthplace of the Beach Boys. And they soon found themselves opening shows for notorious scene pioneers Black Flag at a birthday house party. Jeff McDonald was 15 and his brother Stephen only 11. But that was just the beginning of Red Cross becoming one of the most remarkable, enduring, and unique outfits punk rock ever created. From their Posh Boy debut in 1981 to their latest double album, Red Cross, out now on the infamous In the Red label, they were singular and massively changing not only the landscape of punk rock, but garage rock, psychedelia, pop, and influencing indie rock forever. This year marks Red Cross's 45th birthday, and the brothers are on a world tour, having released a memoir, Now You're One of Us, and the documentary we're talking about today, Born Innocent. Director Andrew Reich has been a working television writer since 1995. He was hired on the 4th season of Friends, where over the next 7 years he rose from executive story editor to executive producer and showrunner, winning an Emmy for Best Comedy along the way. And Andrew is also the creator and host of the Dead Pilots Society podcast, in which comedy pilots from A-list writers that were sold and developed at networks but never shot get the table read they never got a chance to have. Born Innocent, the Red Cross Story is the first film Andrew has directed. And I am beyond excited to welcome the revolutions per movie, Jeff McDonald, Stephen McDonald, and Andrew Reich. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
I want to tell you, this movie rules, and I have two stories to tell you about how it's affected people already. One is that I took someone who wasn't familiar with Red Cross, and they are obsessed with Red Cross. And I feel like the best music documentaries are a gateway to just being like, I'm now going to buy every record, follow them, read every book. So job well done, number one. Number two, the second time I saw it, I dreamed I was the third guitar player in Red Cross. So you've already entered into the dream psyche.
Wow.
And so congratulations. I thought I'd tell you that off the top. You know, my gateway into finding about Red Cross was the We Got Power comp. You know, you have like Ill Repute and 7 Seconds and all these like hardcore bands that I loved at the time. But at the end, there's like this, and then you guys go into like this garage rock with pseudo-intellectual. And I kind of, you know, as like a 13-year-old was not really that well versed in like garage rock. And it just stood out. I loved it. And I was like, what is this? What is this? So Andrew, what was your gateway into Red Cross?
It's funny because I would have heard, so that's the first one, you know, I definitely had that comp and it's like, you know, there's whatever, 40 bands on there.
Yes.
So, you know, all like sort of 45-second long songs. And you're right, that would like, so that, but that's not the thing that really made an impression for me. It was Teen Babes from Monsanto was
Yes.
the gateway record for me. So I had heard Pseudo Intellectual. I'd probably heard a couple, you know, songs that I probably liked, but it was just like that Teen Babes record, which, you know, 1984, I got it. I was in high school. I was like a sophomore in high school. And that was the record that just like blew me away.
Yes.
Because I was also, you know, I was like a hardcore kid. I was listening to all those like 45-second long thrash songs. And this was so
Yes.
not that, but it was so clearly like coming from a punk rock place. But all these songs, which I had never heard the originals, and just like the mystery of all of it. And just the sound was so incredible. So that was really my entrance point.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. I can't understate to you. I feel like when I talk to you, I should be like, Red Cross, I want to tell you, instead of, because you're both here.
Yeah.
But just, it was such a humorless scene at the time. Was there a lot of pushback at the time for you trying to just kind of find your way into a scene that seemed kind of aggressively serious?
Jeff would never say that he was ever trying to get into a scene, at least not past 1979. I probably was trying to get into the scene. And when Jeff made announcements like, I'm not cutting my hair anymore, I remember thinking like,
Yeah.
What are you doing? That's, you know, career suicide or whatever you'd call it, social suicide in our little world. But yeah, you know, I mean, I think that it kind of became a situation where every time we would start to kind of fit into something, then we would take a very radical, sharp turn and bail. And I don't know if what motivated that as much as, you know, I don't know, Jeff McDonald. If you didn't tell me not to, but you were my older brother
Yeah.
who had a huge, uh, influence. And so if you said, I'm not doing this anymore, it was impossible for me not to hear the implication that was, and neither will you be doing.
Well, you know what? A little known fact. Not only did I stop cutting my hair, I stopped combing.
Yeah,
my
yeah,
hair.
I knew this. Yeah, right. Yeah.
And
You were early on the track.
I had such gnarly knots in my hair after a year or two of that. And my girlfriend at the time, she would patiently like brush them out. It took like 2 hours. It was like rescuing a dog.
So, but Jeff, was it, because I don't think I know the answer to this, was there like one moment where you were like, this hardcore scene is over for me? Was there a show? Was there like an incident? Was there a record? Was there something where you're like, I'm like, we're out?
Yes, it's when the Huntington Beach bands were invited to play at the church, and all the Huntington Beach high school kids who were punks came, and they just appeared to be the enemy to us. Like they were new recruits, so we were very suspicious of them. And so violence was always kind of a part of that early hardcore thing, and it was a bummer because we always just tried to avoid violence whenever possible. But I think that was it. That's when we were first introduced via like the early Huntington Beach scene.
That was early. I mean, that would have been like 79 still, maybe, or maybe at least part. Yeah, it would have been 79.
Yeah, because that scene, I mean, there wasn't a word hardcore for it yet, but that kind of became like the hardcore scene in Los Angeles, kind of like Orange County kind of morphed into it. Not all of Orange County, but like the Huntington Beach, what was the name of that high school? Edison High School. It was like the first high school I know of in California that had punk rockers, because all the people that we knew who were punk rock in high school were the only ones. Or there'd be like 2 other people, but there was a high school that had like, hundreds of these kids.
And is that like where TSOL went to school?
Well, TSOL is they're from Long Beach, or at least Singer Jack is, but yeah, that was their first audience. Groups like China White and those right. Kind of early hardcore bands, they were from that area.
Everything that school was in Fullerton, I think.
Huntington.
Oh,
yeah,
Huntington.
Edison High School, Huntington Beach.
So what was the first show you went to that was a hardcore show, or or a punk rock show?
Well, just the first punk rock show we ever went to was at the Whiskey in July of 78. Thank you, Internet. It was X were supporting the Avengers.
Okay.
So it was like a Danger House double bill, and it was a little bit before that era that Jeff was just talking about.
And the Whiskey was all ages then?
Yeah.
It always was. It still is. And the Whiskey, but what was different about the Whiskey then was that they would do it 2 shows a night, regardless of how the tickets had sold. They just was sort of this leftover tradition from the 60s and 70s where often bands would play like 3 nights in a row, like a residency, and then there would be 2 shows. And so we were able to talk our parents into dropping us off at the early show, even though it was quite a ways away from Hawthorne. And we just kind of convinced them that we used this tactic, that it was like the same as dropping us off at the movies. What's the big deal? Kind of.
Am I dreaming, but were you at the Hollywood riot shows?
Yes.
And did I dream that your dad drove up to rescue you? Am I hallucinating that?
No, you're not. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. I the book is sold out, so I haven't got it yet. But like I know this from somewhere, and so yeah, what happened?
Well, it was the Elks Lodge riots. Yeah, there were several big riots in Hollywood a little bit later, but this was like the first big punk rock versus the LAPD riot. It was in downtown Los Angeles, right adjacent to MacArthur Park.
It was at the Park Plaza Hotel where I got married 20 years later. But it it was this big concert. It was a benefit for the first LA punk club, The Mask, which was was having a hard time with their lease or their whatever. They had moved a few times, and but so it was at this big ballroom downtown, and the bands. I can't remember who was the headliner, but
Oh, I know who actually played.
well, I know played. I know the Wipers played.
Yeah.
As a Portland Oregoner, you should.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But they were never listed. They were never listed on the flyer. It was just a special guest. The Zeros played, and the Go-Go's played, and then right after the Go-Go's played, that's when the shit went down. I think Alley Cats and X were also on the bill, and they didn't get to play. But it was basically it's when LAPD like what are they called, like threw down the gauntlet or whatever, and declared war against the LA punk scene. And it was completely unprovoked, completely 100% unprovoked.
And your
Right.
dad's sitting in the car, like parked across the street.
Yeah, in MacArthur Park, like so across the street from the from the Park Plaza Hotel is MacArthur Park, and it's gritty down there now, and it's nothing like it was then. I mean, it
Wow.
was quite hairy, and both our parents were sitting in their 1969 Toyota Corona, and like our big panic would have been like up until the moment that the LAPD came crashing through the doors was, okay, who's going to go out there and tell mom and dad that we can kind of stay a little bit longer, and because the band, because we were always
Right.
just pushing it. And we'd seen the Go-Go's, we want to stay for the Alley Cats and X, and we had some kind of angle with the Alley Cats because there's actually kind of a relation between the McDonald's and Diane Chai, the bass player, and whatever that's in the book. But we could have gone out there and said, Diane hasn't played yet. We're probably thinking about all these kinds of
Yes.
angles that we were going to use. Meanwhile, my parents were across the street in their car watching a squat team assemble with these shields, these plexiglass shields and batons, and they were just thinking, "What the fuck?" And then all of a sudden, I don't remember how thick the wall was. It's probably like
I
20
remember.
50 of them or something just came.
Yeah, the grand staircase. Everyone was on the grand staircase because the ballroom was upstairs. So, like, the cops opened the doors and they kept running up the staircase, beating everyone in their path.
Jeez.
Because it was a very wide staircase, and we just happened to be along the wall and kind of creeped down past them to the front door where our dad just happened to be right there. We just lucked out.
Wow.
But at the front door it was a complete bottleneck, and we were watching like really unpleasant scenes. I mean, I still remember watching Jeff out of the middle class yelling at a cop, and then him like hitting him over the head with a baton, the cops, and his girlfriend as well. And they were later pictured quite famously in Slash magazine as victims of the
LA Times.
I saw it happen, but our dad was just like got up in the middle of the bottleneck, and I just remember, God damn it, Steven, and him just grabbing us kind of thing. And also a fun fact is that it's that staircase is something that gets used a lot in films, or had been, and it's most notable or most noticeable in the David Lynch film Wild at Heart, in the very opening scene.
Oh,
and there's
wow.
so there's a really nasty, violent scene that goes down on the staircase in Wild at Heart. That's the exact staircase that we were sitting on, and where the shit went down. Of course, the Wild at Heart scene was like 10, 15 years later, and when I was watching that movie in the theater, I was like, "Oh, that's where the Elks Lodge riot was." And then a couple 10 years later, I got married.
And your parents were like, "All right, when's the next show?" I mean, was there any fallout from them witnessing that?
Oh, totally. Like, yeah, you are never going out again. Never. That was the whole thing. And then it was kind of a bonding experience because, growing up kind of in the 70s, all the teenagers referred to cops as pigs and all that kind of stuff. And if I ever said anything like that, my dad would get really mad. He wasn't really anti-authority at that point. So it was kind of
I guess
good.
he didn't want us following down his stuff.
Yeah. But it was kind of cool to have them see what really happened, because they would, I mean, as being typical parents of the day, they would have been on the cop's side had they not seen it for themselves.
Yeah. Had we just come home and told them like this wild story, they probably would have been, yeah, what did you guys do to deserve that? You know? But yeah, if anything, yeah. So I do remember driving away and my dad yelling we were not going to gut any more shows. But then the coverage was in the LA Times, Jeff just mentioned, and I think that they kind of realized that it was like, you know, these places where they were dropping us off were actually perfectly safe. It was the supposedly protective, authoritative side that they needed to worry about, and you know, or the authorities or whatever. And so, you know, the whole thing was kind of
the cops in those days were really bizarre.
Yeah.
They were strange. I mean, they would, you know, they would hassle you if you're at, you know, you had a whiskey show or the Starwood, and say things like, why don't you comb your hair? It's like, what? Because, you know what the thing was, the cops, you know, they were really out of control, and they chose the punk rockers. Right. But then, luckily for the punk rockers, the hip hop kids came along, and then they started hassling those guys. So if you see Straight Out of Compton, that's exactly how cops were treating the punkers the year before all that, 2 years before that stuff. So they just needed someone to pick on.
Yeah, there was like a book going around like LA high schools that was like singling out like, this is what stoner kids are doing. This is what punk rock thread is, hip hop. And you see it a bit in decline too when they talk to the woman who wrote that book for these LA schools. But it's incredible. I love that your parents are in this film.
Yeah, me too.
Was it hard to get them, Andrew, to agree to be in this film?
It did take a while of me. I remember there was probably years of me like saying to Steve and Jeff, hey, could you set up a time where I could talk to your parents? And it was just always like, I don't know, like, is this being put off? And then I think, you know, I went to their house with Astrid, Jeff's daughter, and I think, you know, so she was there and they got to see their granddaughter, and, you know, I think that sort of put them at ease. And we really did like, you know, the conversation with them did not start with the terrible story that's in the film about what happened to Steve at a young age. That, you know, was after probably, you know, a while of talking about more pleasant things and their grandkids, and, you know, but, you know, it was the hardest interview of the film for sure, because it wasn't like I relished bringing up unpleasant subjects with these very nice people who, you know, didn't ask to be in show business, you know.
Right.
So yeah, our mom is insanely shy and really, really, really in touch with her emotions. So I was kind of worried that she wouldn't be able to handle it. Did I tell you? I mean, I think I may have warned Andrew that my mom one time was with her sisters from Indiana. So she brought her to Hollywood, and they were hanging out, and they went to a taping of the new Gong show, and they got pulled up on stage and questioned. My mom burst into tears.
Oh, wow.
On the Gong show. So like, I was thinking, oh, this is going to be insane, but she was good.
That might be the best Red Cross origin story ever. You know, our mom, by the way, was pulled up on the new Gong show and burst into tears. Therefore, we made Neurotica. You know, like, that's amazing. Well, Andrew, you mentioned that, you know, some years had gone by before you know, were able to interview their parents. So when did the film start coming into being, and how did you approach Stephen and Jeff?
It was kind of shocking to me when I did find a record of like the first interview for the film. It was in 2015, you know, so it's been like, you know, it's been close to 10 years. It was, you know, I'd been a fan, like I said, since 84, and just always thought that their story was so fascinating, and just was constantly discovering new, interesting things about them. But it wasn't until I heard Steve tell the story of the sort of abduction that, you know, we're trying not to spoil for viewers, but that I was just like, geez, someone's got to make this documentary, and it was my wife who suggested that I should do it. But never made a film, certainly never made a documentary, never had aspirations to be a documentary filmmaker. But the more I just thought about it, I was just like, I felt so grounded in both their story and the scenes, all the different scenes that they were coming from, and having followed them, for so long. And we have mutual friends who sort of made the connection. And I think, Jeff and Steve just, sort of adore these mutual friends and trusted them, and I'm close with them. So I was sort of vetted by these mutual friends to, and I think that helped Jeff and Steve to just sort of take the leap to trust me with, telling the story. But it did, look, it took a long time for various reasons. Well, mostly because I didn't know what I was doing. And I didn't sort of, we started filming some interviews and some shows and stuff, but it was really like, I didn't totally know how I was going to do it. And, there was a pandemic in there. And, but the first few years of work were very sort of sporadic. It was sort of like, hey, it's been 8 months. Maybe we can like sit down again and do. But I think the fact, like, it actually was great that it took so long.
Right.
Because I just feel like, it got more of the story, and there was time to just discover all kinds of cool archival things that just I wouldn't have found if, in a shorter period of time. There was so much digging, so much time where I could just, dig around for stuff, and found really incredible, discoveries along the way.
Well, that being said, I mean, this Red Cross, to me, it could be an 8-part mini series, documentary series. Like, there's so much to talk about. How do you choose what ends up in a 90-minute documentary?
I mean, you're right. It was so, and there are like the real hardcore fans are just like, this is way too short. But my guiding star was always just like, I want this film to work with people, for people who've never heard of the band, and so it was just, and I wanted to keep it. I was just imagining that somewhere down the road, this is going to be streaming somewhere, and someone's going to be like, I like music documentaries. I don't really know this band, but I know some of the bands or people, that are in the movie. Let's see, how long is it? Oh, it's under 90 minutes. Okay,
Yeah,
I'll check that out.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's just like, it's 187 minutes. Like, no, I'm not doing this. Like
Part 2.
Yeah. So I just really wanted to keep it under an hour and a half.
Right.
And I really just wanted to make sure everything in it was going to be interesting to people who weren't already, fanatics.
Right. And Stephen, in the film, you talk about how, at a young age, you always dreamed about playing arenas when that wasn't a cool dream to have, right, in the scene. It seems like having a documentary made about Red Cross would be just a parallel dream. Was this easy to accept? Did you always kind of fantasize about like, oh, maybe there'll be something like this down the road or right now?
I mean, with all humility intact, it's definitely, I think we've always known that we've had an interesting story. And that's kind of been part of our, motive. It's been our MO rather, to create an interesting story. Like even before we had anything, just the fact that I was 11 and Jeff was 14, we would, we were basically abusing that information and using it however we could. And so, and then just in the process of our experience, we've always just managed to, I don't know. I mean, a lot of times we'd think about maybe something didn't succeed financially or something, but we'd always be like, but we got a great story out of it, So I always think, I mean, people do that, but I mean, I think we've always been thinking in those terms. So by even by like 1992, I think we felt like, at least I always felt like we had a better story than any of our peers, any of the grunge bands. I was like, oh yeah, Kurt Cobain, sure, you lived under a bridge, fine. Did you run away to Las Vegas when you were 11?
Well, I mean, and for me, I could have never dreamed of a documentary. I mean, people had hassled us to write a book for many years, but the documentary, no. For me, the legacy was just, my fantasy was like some kid would find like a dog-eared copy of Born Innocent in a thrift store and get inspired to start a band. I always had that in mind from the earliest days, because I discovered a lot of music that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The cutout bin was a godsend.
Right.
I have so many, Meat Puppets record with a hole punched in the corner. I'm like, yeah, this looks cool. And then you're like, oh my God. Like,
I'm talking like 25-cent thrift store records that are so scratched they barely play.
I have two brothers that are musically inclined. I was in a band with my brother for a long time, and my other brother runs a record store and a reissue label. He works with Greg Sage. He puts out all the Wipers reissues and Jan Deck and Etta James and stuff. So we also pooled our money to buy records. The psychic language and the kind of kind bickering and the language of being like, I don't really want to talk about that, that's boring, and being like, no, I want to talk about it, is only a dynamic that comes from being in a kitchen in the morning and being like, who drank the last of the orange juice, right? I'm just so interested in the dynamic still.
Yeah, the brother thing. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just a very natural part of our existence. Yet, I think, having these shared experiences can cause like flame ups at times and irritants. So we both keep an eye on, on what's real and what's just based on the fact that we're so familiar with each other. We think we have the right to like be bitchy.
Well, I would say what's really interesting for me is like what's really been revealed in the past 12 months is that the dynamic is there's nothing set in stone, and that we constantly if there's a shift in roles a little bit, it comes up in the special dynamic way, and there's surprises still. It's not like, oh, I know exactly what he's going to say. I have no idea often, and in some ways that can be exhausting, but in other ways it keeps it fresh and exciting, and it makes me curious about like, well, what's next? And because this past year has been a really different year for us. And having done the album, and now the book is coming out, and the book came out and the movie is playing in theaters now, and it's all, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's my long-winded way of saying it. We're not jaded. It's not like we know what's going to happen always. And yes, sure, we can hit buttons in the other person that no one else really can necessarily. But then the flip side of that is that we can like sit in a room together face to face and really trust the other person's opinion in a unique way that I think is also very special to the sibling dynamic of the people that create together, the siblings that create together. So
we get to speak in shorthand with each other. I mean, like, doing on the last record, we wrote a lot of songs together for the first time in years. And yeah, because we have all this shorthand, the whole process moves along so much quicker.
Well, I want to ask about that because your new album is incredible. It's the best one. I don't know how you're doing that still. But the song, I wanted to ask you about writing the song Born Innocent, which is a lovely back and forth autobiographical song. How did that concept come up? Was it lyrics first? How did you come to the realization that you wanted to write a song about Red Cross?
Well, I mean, Andrew asked us if we could write a song for the film, and I already had the tune. Stephen and I just started, writing the lyrics together. We're very spontaneous, very, very quickly. So it's, we kind of like, I think we're really trying to kind of set like where we came from, but more than like the absolute, step-by-step story. We were just talking about like the environment in which we came.
Well, I think originally we did say like, oh, let's write the story of Red Cross. And then when we sat down, we're like, Andrew's like getting, major props for fitting it into 88 minutes or whatever. How the hell are we going to fit it into 3 minutes, much less with a tune? So it was sort of like by the time we finished, we realized we'd only gotten to like, basically our first rehearsal in the story.
Well, I think the song, well, the song basically more than the story of Red Cross is more the story of our escape from Hawthorne.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's a really powerful line, Stephen, where you say Hollywood ain't no place for a child. And after watching the film, it's like really, it's a really beautifully honest line. I was really touched that you guys were being also so frank about this in a very concise way. It's a really beautiful song. And the intro, the best Who prologue ever to a song that the Who hasn't written, right? And then there's like,
Yeah.
like, how do you come up with this stuff? How do you do like the little, like post-chorus turnaround? There's like that little second and a half musical little juicy bit before it goes back. Does this come easy to you? I'm just obsessed with how you guys write songs.
Well, usually the songs that actually make it to, you know, recordings or live performance do come easy. I mean, I am lazy. I
I can
can't
verify
deal.
that.
I have spent long periods of times on some. What? Yeah, but I've already been through that period in my life where you tinker and tinker and tinker and tinker and change things only to end up where you began, where you started. So so some of the, you know, so we know better than that to waste time. And of course, you know, the Who thing, that was intentional because I'm a giant Pete Townsend fan.
Well, so Jeff, my question is, did you have those chords and melodies floating around before Andrew asked us gave us the assignment?
Well, yeah, I had all the songs except for the chorus, and I was driving to your house, and I was thinking that as a chant, the Born Innocent thing, that was kind of a chant. So then
okay, so you presented that at the same time. I feel like the only lyric that you really had put to melody was we are.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, the chorus, the chant chorus. Yeah, that just kind of came, but everything else, you know, the music was there, then the lyrics we just kind of put together.
We both kind of wrote our own verse, but in the company of the other. And we kind of double checked with each other. And then the bridge was definitely like a full collab. And like, there's a lyric, it's okay. So the bridge is, it was time to, what's it? Not eject. It was time to reject. It was time to defect. It was time to defect that landlocked void today. Take the swamp highway north past Inglewood. So that's the bridge. And I had just learned that there's a street in LA that we lived right next to called La Cienega. We lived on the southern end of La Cienega. Now 10, 12 miles north is the northern end of La Cienega, and it dead ends into Sunset Boulevard. And that would have been the road that we took to get to the whiskey when we were little kids with our parents. And I just randomly looked it up, like, what does La Cienega translate to? And it was a Spanish word, and it directly translates to the swamp.
Wow.
So I thought that was funny. And we turned La Cienega in the song into the swamp highway. And then we say north past Inglewood, which is the first town north of us and the first town south of Hollywood. And also kind of just a cool town to reference. It's in Pulp Fiction, and we just always liked Inglewood.
Did you guys, because what was so cool to me, you know, because I think when I said, like, would you guys write a song? Maybe it could be, and I mentioned Creek Alley, but I know I mentioned History Lesson Part 2 by the Minutemen.
Okay.
And that, you know, he's just like, we learned punk rock in Hollywood, drove up from Pedro. And, you know, so it's another song about like them driving there from their South Bay town, like into Hollywood. And I don't know if that
no,
was
you know
like,
what that is? That's a very Southern California thing. It's like the SNL skit, The Californians. When you grow up in Los Angeles, because we're all kind of we're all tied together with this web of freeways and streets, and everything is very far away. Everyone, you know, gets their license at 16, and it's all about navigating Los Angeles. So we all become obsessed with directions. And I mean,
like, don't take
it's insane, but that's what the Minutemen were saying. That's what we were saying. It's
like the Californians. They'd be like, don't take the swamp highway at 5. It will be jammed.
Oh, you can't go on La Cienega after 5. The airport traffic.
Well, it's also amazing because at the end, Jeff, just when you go, it's perfection. It doesn't have to have that, right?
No.
But it's so Red Cross that it has it, you know? I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, you know, it's really weird. I was thinking about like when we made our album Born Innocent, like all of our peers, like the punk bands, like, you know, like the people that we knew, like Adolescents, Black Flag, all those groups. We were the only band doing oohs, ahs, and screams, like, you know, like ow. We were the only one doing that kind of improvised sounds, grunts, and
ahs.
Yeah, but I mean, we were doing that because that was the Mick Jagger in us.
Well, it was also the Runaways. Runaways, it's Cherry Bomb.
Yeah.
All right, sure, right.
But no punk bands did that kind of stuff. They didn't. They left all that out. And for us, it was always kind of like the woohoos and like Brown Sugar always kind of gave the song the spice. You know, it's just like little things that you just kind of keep the whole vibe rolling.
Well, those are the easy parts that you can learn. I mean, like learning how to play.
But you have to be enjoying yourself to do that. You can't do a forced woo.
Okay, let's put it this way. I never learned how to play the solo to Stairway to Heaven, but there are tape recordings of me saying, "Does anyone remember Laughter?"
Right. Well, I want to talk about Born Innocent because, again, just seeing that cover in a record store, nothing looked like that. I couldn't even tell what I was looking at, right? I was like, is that a human with a, like what kind of beast is this?
Stephen was, I think, kind of ended up looking, this is just for people who are a little bit older, cross between Leatherface and Marty Allen.
Oh, perfect.
But Marty Allen, I'm forgetting. I'm drawing a blank.
60s, 70s comedian, like Vegas comedian.
Yeah.
Kind of he was of the Buddy Hackett.
Yes, exactly. Well, in the film, you talk about, you know, after you were reclaiming some fun after some of the traumas of your youth, and you were getting into garbage culture, and on your records, you're dedicating things to like all your bitchin' idols, Patty Hearst, Tootie, Annette, Pet and the rest of the Carrie Nations, Lori Partridge. Where were you finding this garbage culture? Because it probably was hard to find like a copy of Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, right?
I started getting into the whole movie revival scene when I discovered Pink Flamingos. And so we all would like, you know, if there wasn't a punk show, there was like, you know, a Russ Myers film festival. But the minute that the VHS machine became popular, one of, you know, when people first started opening video stores, one of the first videos available was, for some odd reason, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. It was like really early. So, you know, of course,
Myers was probably had something to do with that. I mean, he was a big part of I don't know if he put out Beyond the Valley of the Dolls because that was 20th Century Fox.
Didn't. He would independently put out his own VHS. Yeah. You would buy it from him and his Eve.
Yeah, and he had the sticker mint from the original print. Yeah,
exactly.
So we were lucky enough to have a video store that carried those things. You know, so with that and the New Art Theater and the various revival houses.
There were 2 video stores. What was the first? Video Outtakes.
And then that was in Redondo Beach. And they had Russ Myers and a few of the other videos. And then that mutated into Video Archives, which eventually would hire Quentin Tarantino.
Okay.
But it was a really great store because they were also into rock and roll. And one of the main guys, Lance, he would always put like his bootleg Shindig, you know, videos on the shelf and all that kind of stuff, you know. So
amazing.
It was great.
We would talk to him for hours. Yeah.
It was like pure free YouTube.
Yeah, that's amazing. You need one of those. I had a bicycle shop in town that the guy just had all foreign films up front you would just rent for free. But he made his money with a bicycle shop. And so you go in and be like, oh, here's Bertolucci, you know, here's Fellini and all this. And he just put it in a paper bag and would just send you out with it, right? And those kind of relationships, definitely, it's kind of a film, you know, obviously opened your eyes as well, it sounds like, in terms of creating this thing. But the films of yours, I cannot understate the importance of the Dave Markey films you were in and how much we watched and rewatched them. And I just wanted to ask about what it was like being in those Lovedoll films.
Well, it was kind of like a dream come true because the Pink Flamingos was like a big guiding force for us. So to be able to actually start to be involved in something kind of like that, an underground movie, was really fun. And no one had any aspirations that it was going to actually be finished. But to Dave's credit,
Yes.
he kept at it. It's like we did it like the way we did Andrew's movie, our movie. It was like, oh, let's film this weekend. Okay, anytime someone,
Right.
if Dave managed to cobble together $20 for film every, once a month, that we would get together and have these do scenes.
Oh, it's incredible. Steven, I got to ask about Anarchy 6.
Sure.
One of my favorite hardcore records of all time. I mean, I was just at the right time to be like, oh, the music's great. The band you've put together is great. But I'm like, oh, here's the token reggae song. It's just beautiful. That must have been really fun to just take something that you obviously loved.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, it was a group effort, and it happened very quickly. I think it was, believe it or not, it all happened in a day or two.
I thought you guys wrote and recorded the entire album in one day.
Yeah, it was sort of like, it was a lot like Please Please Me.
Wasn't there a song on that record called Old Punks?
Yeah, Old Punks.
Yeah, now you're an old punk.
Yeah, yeah. It was all about how old punks would just talk about the mask and they don't know anything. They're stupid.
Yeah, and I loved all the little interstitial things like, well, I like punk rock. What do you like about it? Well, it's the most intense music there is. And it's like, it wasn't like you gotta live, like think fast to live fast or something. It was just ludicrous. But it was like 2 years or 3 years earlier, I would have totally been like, yes, absolutely. I think fast and I live fast. Whatever you say.
Yeah, Anarchy 6 was like the Rutles of hardcore. They were the Rutles.
Absolutely.
People who got that record and liked it unironically.
Was it reviewed in Search and Destroy magazine?
But what's that? Yeah, maybe. But I was one of those difficult lead singers. Like, I think that Dave, Marky, and the rest of the guys probably would have loved to have played more shows. And I was not always up for it. And we did.
You did a couple amazing shows. They were good.
We played once at the Anti-Club.
Yeah, that was a great show.
Yeah, we played at the Anti-Club. It just required me staying in character the entire time. And believe it or not, I'm not a trained thespian.
Oh, I can't believe it. Well, another really lovely thing in the film, at least from somebody who's in the Pacific Northwest, is just how many artists in the Pacific Northwest were affected by Red Cross. You have interviews with, King Buzzo and Mark Arm and Steve Turner. I mean, again, I can't overstate the importance of the way you looked, the way you played your shows, those albums. Like my band Death Midget became Portland's Red Cross. Like, we're wearing lederhosen with glitter on our chest all of a sudden, right? And we're cooking garlic on hot plates behind our amps, right? We're putting on a show, and it was because of you. And I feel like there's something in the Northwest of that combination of like kind of glam and metal and punk rock all jamming together. Could you see that? Like, Andrew, when you chose like who to talk to like about Red Cross, was it easy to find these people, and like what was your process in terms of like finding them?
I mean, I had a sense, just again from sort of like being there in the 80s and following all this stuff. And when I did start to hear those, the Seattle scene bubbling up, I could tell there was like a Red Cross influence. And I'd read and I knew, I think Jonathan Poneman was I can't remember if it was Bruce or Jonathan, but one of the Sub Pop guys talks about like how Neurotica was one of the real, sort of instigating things for them starting the Sub Pop label. And so I knew that those bands, I knew going in, and then, Steve and Jeff were just like, so great about making introductions for me to people, so it was just, they could say like, hey, I'm going to connect you over text with, Jeff from Pearl Jam and, whoever, and Dave Dieter, from Presidents of the United States of America, who ended up sort of on the cutting room floor. He was super helpful, and very connected to all I think maybe he was the one who connected me to Kim Thale, but everyone, who I got in touch with. I mean, Mark and Steve from Mudhoney were coming to like record in the Melvins, space, like, and Steve is in the Melvins and he was there. So that was an easy connection to make. But basically, like, most of that was, Stephen and Jeff, or, like I said, Dave up there, and Sub Pop Records was really helpful too. We shot at Sub Pop, but yeah, I mean, it was really, clear to me at the time. I was like, oh, these bands are listening to Red Cross. Like,
Yes.
these bands was, are Neurotica fans. And even though for some people maybe can't hear that, and it's harder to hear, like, listening to Soundgarden, you're like, wait, they're just like listening to Led Zeppelin, right? I know, but it was just like, yes, but sort of filtered through Red Cross. Red Cross brought a lot of that sort of classic rock and that classic sort of metal, like into the stew. And so, I knew that, like, they, those bands were hugely influenced.
Yeah, I feel like, before Red Cross, it took Red Cross for our eyes and ears to adjust to this. And then after that, it was kind of like, all right, this isn't that weird to be like, talk about my love of Kiss, right? Or
Yes.
my love of the Partridge Family. It was like, of course, we all are on the same page, but it was just an unspoken thing. So it's really truthful. You guys really kicked the door open, I think, for so many people.
What Jeff
Wow.
talks about in the film, he says that Teen Babes from Monsanto is when we came out as rock stars.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask about that album because Geza X, the legend, produced it. And he has some great moments in the film, Andrew, where you catch him talking about it being the most, like, it's transcendent. He says it was demonically transcendent to listen to you guys do your Bowie cover. What can I ask what it was like working with Geza X?
Well, it was very fun. I mean, he's very, he's a very, very quick-witted, eccentric, genius type. So,
And
it was it was easy.
we were really enamored of the records he had produced with the
Yes.
Germ and the Bags. And so for us, by like 1983 or 84, when we were doing that, I mean, those records were seminal, important records to us. And we had so much respect for him, but we were also, it just was natural and easy. Like, he's, I don't know, Geza's probably 10 years older than Jeff or something. So
Yeah.
we would have been very intimidated, but then he was just immediately treated us like we were legitimate musician artists. And so there was a huge, like, encouraging. It was like a big boost. And so that was just positive.
Well, Andrew, this is the part of the film where you're starting to pull in like all the multitude of people who've been and in and out of the band. And I love that, it goes from people being like, oh, I can't listen to Teen Babes because they were out of their mind on drugs. And like, it's unlistenable. I just really like the dynamic of tracking all these people down. Was it hard to find the people who had been part of Red Cross?
Yeah, I mean, some were. It's funny, even that, like, going into it, I thought I knew so much. Like, I didn't really know about Victor Indrizzo, like, going in, because Victor, like, who's this incredible drummer who's played with, when I went to his studio, he's got all these gold records on the wall. He's played with like Willie Nelson, and he plays in Alanis Morissette's band, and like, but because he joins the band after Neurotica and quits during Third Eye and isn't on the cover of Third Eye. Like, he's credited. If you read the liner notes carefully, you could see.
We never did it. We never did a press cycle.
Yeah.
With
So because I wasn't in LA, they were playing lots of shows with Victor. Like, if you were in LA following Red Cross, there was definitely a Victor Indrizzo period you would have been aware of. But there wasn't like any press, and he's not on really fully on any of the records, but he was actually a really important member of the band and is this incredible drummer. So there were things like that where I was just like, I learned there's a flip side article which did this like chronology of all the lineups of Red Cross, and that was super helpful for me.
Okay.
To just like, okay, here's the list of people I got to talk to.
Right.
And I did, and some of them are hard to track down. And some of them, you're talking about Dave Peterson, who was on Teen Babes, who's the one who's like, I can't listen to it. Yeah, I was like not someone who a little bit camera shy and was like a little hard to talk into doing it. But, that to me, it's like, I love that record and I love the way it sounds. But I did feel like it was interesting to have the drummer say like, I can't, I can't listen to it. Because I didn't want to just have... To me, it's boring when you have a movie where it's just like every record is just person after person saying like, it's the greatest record ever. And then the next one, like, this is the greatest record ever. Like, it's just not that interesting.
You have the fastbacks in there going like, that one, it's like, it's straight to my heart, right? I know what kind of film this is going to be.
And the fact is, look, the fastbacks were raved about like 6 different records. I could have put that in, like.
Exactly.
And
of course.
To be fair, the fastbacks aren't even like, they're not sort of shitting on Third Eye. They're just saying factually, like, it was not a very grungy record. And at the time that grunge is coming up, Third Eye comes out, and it's so not like, for the people who are like, oh, I hear this band's really influenced, like that record does not, sound like Alice in Chains. But so it was, and I did, like, I was like, I got, almost everyone. There are a few members who were like, whatever, Chet Lehrer, who was like only in the band for a minute or whatever. Like, I didn't talk to the people.
Oh, Chet, you don't need him.
Jack Irons did one tour. I'm not gonna.
Right.
But what was tricky was like, you hit a limit. Like, how many characters can we meet in a film, right? Like, so some people in the later lineups, even though I love those, like, I love the 90s records so much.
Me too.
And you do, whatever, we meet Jerry Fennelly and Brian Reitzel, but briefly, because I think I'm very aware, like, I think the audience is reaching a saturation point for how many new characters they can
take on. It's like a Dostoevsky.
Well, I think since you were talking about Victor, and Third Eye, it would have been great if you interviewed Klaus Meine. He was part of our history. He was in the room when Victor quit the band.
Oh,
from Klaus Meine from the Scorpions was recording next door.
Wow.
And he came in to check out what we were doing. And Victor had just told us that he's leaving the band when he walked in the room. And so it was like all of a sudden the air just got...
Wait, I think that is that in the movie? It's not in the movie.
But it was such a weird, it was so surreal. I mean, it was just like a moment, but it was like, wow, this is just insane.
Yeah, you guys have had a lot of moments. It is amazing how many moments you have. I mean, you have Bowie at like one of your first shows or first like Hollywood
first
show.
Nightclub show.
It's like,
it's like these people just they just sashay through our lives. It's kind of barely noticeable, but yeah.
David Bowie, Klaus Meine. Klaus Meine was there to give us a thumbs up out right as our favorite drummer.
Well, I remember when we were making Third Eye, we were hanging out like it was that Sound City that later there was a documentary about that studio, but it was very kind of like they had a very ghetto-y kind of stoner pad room to hang out in. It was like a plaid couch and a vending machine. It was really horrible. But I remember Rudy Schenker used to come in all the time.
Oh, wow.
And we were just sitting on the couch going, oh my God, Rudy Schenker.
Jeez.
But they were doing the what's that song?
The Wind of Change is the album.
They were doing Wind of Change.
Brought down the Berlin Wall. I don't know.
Well, yeah, and that was in L.A.?
Yeah, it was Panorama City.
So could Red Cross have come to existence in any other city? It doesn't seem like it.
No. Well, yeah. No.
I say no.
Now, we wouldn't have quite the colorful stories that we have, but I think that Jeff and I, because our main influences were all very mainstream. It was television, and it was this 60s rock and roll music that, sold millions of copies. So I think we would have been inspired to pick up guitars and try to do something. I just don't know if it would have nurtured quite. I don't know if we would have been nurtured the way we were anywhere else.
Maybe, but look at Kim and Kelly Deal.
Yeah.
From Ohio.
Yeah, the Ohio bands blow my mind. I'm like, what?
I know. Ohio is like one of the most insanely diverse rock and roll states.
Cramps. You're like, the Cramps spent time in Ohio. You're like, how? How is that possible? But, I was recently in LA for an extended period of time. Like one of the first times where I wasn't like showing up to a club, sitting behind a merch table and leaving. And I really got a sense last time of like, I'm like, the light in LA, I'm like, I get it. I get Wall of Voodoo, why they could have only come from here, right? You know, there's something about it. And in the film, Andrew, you capture great things about them, you know, their house being torn down, living by the airport. I mean, I can't only even imagine how the sound of that influenced you as kids, you know, just living and drowning that out. Your escape from Hawthorne, you know, just everyone in LA, it feels like that was in punk rock worked at a fish and tackle shop or a fish and chip shop. It's really weird. And I'm like, this seems like an LA story.
I mean, it's so much of what, I mean, it also drew me to it because I did think, you know, this is a way of telling a lot of the history of Los Angeles over the last, you know, 45 years, which is something. I'm a transplant from New Jersey, but I was just drawn here by just reading about it and Flipside or whatever, just reading, you know, and just loving all the bands from here. It just felt like just this mythical place, and it was just so cool to get here. And just you know, I feel like that story of the freeway construction and all of that is just so, you know, it's such an interesting part of understanding the Red Cross story.
Wait, so you came to LA, but didn't your TV job bring you to LA, or was it how did you end up here?
I mean, yes, like I did come out partly with show business aspirations, and that was part of it. You know, like I did think, like you know, I knew.
So you didn't have your job already at Friends?
No, God, no. I came out with just like my best friend from high school and my college girlfriend, and we just drove across country and like found an apartment like in the Beverly Fairfax area, and just like tried to get whatever jobs we could get. You know, so with hopes that we would like end up working in show business, which, you know, my friend and I did. But it was also partly, it was just like, well, I could go to Raji's, like I could go to like these clubs that like I've been like reading about, and maybe like, you know, Agent Orange will be playing, or like bands that I just never really got to see on the East Coast. You know, like I could, you know, I never saw you guys. I mean, I know you played in Hoboken and stuff, but I never made it to those shows. But there were just so many bands that would just play an occasional local show that, you know, I mean, I got to see Arthur Lee play at Raji's, you know, like
amazing.
You know, it was incredible. I was like, you would never stay on these. You're not going to see Arthur Lee just like wander in and play a show in a tiny little basement. Because I was like close to New York, it didn't have the same, because I was going in and like to the Peppermint Lounge and Danceteria. It didn't have the same romance, but I also knew like in that hardcore scene, which I was going to, is just like, this is just a bunch of meatheads from Queens who are here to like beat people up. Like it kind of, it's kind of cool. I got to see a lot of great bands, but it also kind of sucked because people were just like such dicks.
Did you go to City Gardens too? Did you make it to this?
Oh yeah, we played there.
Oh my God. What was a Red Cross show at City Gardens like?
Well, we call it Shitty Gardens.
Oh, of course.
Well, that was an interesting show because that was our very first tour, and our first tour was a disaster. And you know, you know, in a place like that, I think there's probably 25 people showed up to the gig, if that. But we were so exhausted, and there was nowhere for us to stay. And we found a really scary motel in Trenton, New Jersey, and we rented one room. We were going to nap and take a shower before we left, and there was a cat on the bed when we got in the room, and the room was completely infested with cockroaches, and it was so bad we paid for the room. We had all been in a station wagon with our dirty clothes for 3 weeks, right. And this place was so gross that it turned around and left.
Well, I think we might have taken showers and bailed, but
yeah, maybe.
I remember they had a flea issue too. Like we immediately.
But that represents Trenton, New Jersey for me. I don't know what Trenton, New Jersey is like. I don't know what City Gardens was actually like, but that was our experience, and it, so that's where my brain takes me. You know.
Well, that first tour, in the film, you're talking about like overloading your suitcase with clothing that you might not even get to wear. It made me want to ask, because seeing you play, I always thought you were like massive, right? You know, like I was seeing you in a room with more people than I usually saw at a show. You put on a show. You always were professional. You kicked ass. You had records out. You were on tour. I just assumed, oh, they're huge. Like everywhere they play, like people come out and pack it. But when you're putting that first tour together, did you have that mentality of like, okay, we're going to give them the show of their life?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was fun because we knew that we can, you know, with our razzmataz, you know, show them something that they hadn't ever seen in like San Antonio. I mean, we felt that. It was kind of, you know, but, you know, the shows where, you know, there would be surprises, like a show in North Carolina would be, you know, well attended, be great. And then we'd play somewhere else to like, you know, 40 people. And but it was always full on. We always went full on because we got to see Black Flag do the same thing, because, you know, is the fact that they were huge, but they were also becoming experimental and they had lost a lot of their fan base. So I saw them play full on shows, full on, you know, power shows to very few people. So, you know, it was kind of like, see, you know, your peers do that. You just push through no matter what. And it's like, you know, it's like, I was, you know, Cher's new book is out, and I saw an interview with her talking about after their first bunch of hit singles, they owed the IRS, you know, $250,000, and they were broke, and no one liked them anymore, and they had to play clubs, and they actually played a show in front of 4 people in Vegas, at, you know, at a nightclub.
Wow.
And it's like, and I, you know, everyone experiences that kind of stuff. It doesn't matter who you are. And
it doesn't seem like it's ever, there's no sure thing.
Never. And another bizarre thing that we got to experience was our first, you know, and it's covered in the movie, our first gig, we were booed. And, you know, we were booed by our peers in our neighborhood, and we kind of just worked with it. And, you know, I'm surprised we were able to do that. And years later, it would come in handy, because there would be times when we'd be on tour as support act where, you know, we did a show at the Dallas Bowl with the Go-Go's when we first met them. And, you know, we did our full Red Cross thing opening. It was a cowboy in the round kind of
called the Bronco Bowl
media place. And we were just being, you know, booed by cowboys. So like one night you're turning people on to what you do, and the next night there's cowboys booing you. So, you know, we got to experience those kind of like Bob Dylan 1966 moments.
Yeah, but how did you? I always felt that like there were a couple things that gave me a chip on my shoulder. One was like just being like, yeah, I like Devo. Sorry, you know what I mean? Like you just get a chip on your shoulder, and I'm assuming punk rock at some point did that to you too. It went from booing to being like, bring it on. We're cool with it. Were you ever nervous about doing your own thing versus like trying to be like, oh, we need to please people?
No, not in front of a punk audience in Los Angeles. That was always fun. That was always a fun challenge. Like if we were on some big hardcore bill, like, you know,
because Jeff would make me go talk to them and deal with.
No, I'm talking about the actual performances. The performances were fearless.
And I was scared for sure.
But the performances were fearless. They were always really fun. Like whether we won an audience over or they were throwing things, it was always fun. Never boring.
I mean, Jeff antagonized the Suicidal gang, you know, the Suicidal Tendencies gang. It seems like not a lot of fear there.
You know, it was all in fun. Even, you know, like they were throwing kiwi fruits at us, you know, so it wasn't real violence.
But you started it by saying that the song we were going to play was from a record that you bought at Mike Muir's mom's garage sale.
Oh yeah. I forgot it to the Jennifer
Which
Schwartz.
Is really not. I mean, that's not. That's you know, a pretty innocuous thing to say.
But it has the words Mike Muir's mom in the sentence. Like, that's all they needed to hear.
I do know like what a microphone and banter can do. Like it just
and a guitar.
Yeah, exactly.
Gives you a false sense of protection. You know, like I always fell for that. I was always very naive in that sense, where as long as I had a guitar on, I just felt like no one could hurt me. And it's like, but in reality they could, but they never did.
And I love that so many of your fearless ideas, you're like, well, we're at Reading. Let's open with the Overture to Tommy. Why not? And it's like, to me, I'm like, that is a great idea. And that's one of those things you're like, we can do it. We can do it well. This is the right place to do it. And then it just doesn't, it rolls over people, right? And you can kind of feel it and you're like, oh, we still got 7 minutes to go. But I always loved that about Red Cross. I always felt like you always had your heel stuck in, and the left turns were always, I thought, really beautiful and delicious. And like Andrew said, I love those 90 records. One of the most consistent legendary bands of all time, I think. Like, your recorded output is amazing and your live show never falters. It's, you're as great as you've ever been, which is really hard to do.
Well, I mean, if you're going to be on stage, you better be the best you can, or it's embarrassing to do.
Yes.
So look, fortunately, we always just do this when the time is right, when the schedules are right, and we feel like doing it. We're very privileged in that sense to be able to pick it up and put it down. But so far we've been able to do that. But I love providing to people what I want to see when I go to a show. That's where I'm coming from, the Jeff section.
I would say there's a whole lot of luck that comes into it for at least us for this year, for sure. I mean, not only I feel like we're really lucky to have made such an album that I'm so proud of. And then it's been so well received. I feel like I'm really lucky about that. And then these other projects, which I can't take very much credit for, the film and also the memoir too, because they were really just like Jeff and I did interviews, and Dan did all the heavy lifting and sewed it together into a cohesive narrative as Andrew did as well. And the fact that those are both, being well received, and that people that I trust are not just blowing sunshine up my ass, because I'm not very objective. But they seem to be, everyone really likes them, and they're really well received, and they're good. And I mean, 3 in a row, that's absurd. And in 1 year. So it's just like a lot of luck too, and but I mean, I guess, we get credit for being just crazy enough to be persistent about all of this.
Well, you have this documentary made about you, and I'm sure I've fantasized about it, but if there was a Red Cross biopic, who would you imagine being the members of Red Cross, and what would the film be called?
Oh, shit. You mean then, like, what period are we dealing with? Are we going to do?
I'm talking about these two cool people I know called Jeff and Steven. I think Robert would probably play himself. I think he'd just show up and play like a young version of himself.
Well, I'm always worried when I watch Corey Feldman videos that I am Corey Feldman.
Oh, yeah.
That would be good.
So maybe Corey Feldman could play the current Steve McDonald.
And Cher could play me.
I love it. And what would it be called?
I don't know, but it'd be the ultimate buddy film, that's for sure.
That's what it should be called. Red Cross in the ultimate buddy film. Well, I always ask this same question at the end of every episode, but I tailor it depending on what we're talking about. On a scale from 11 to 76, how many kisses in the wind do you give Born Innocent, the Red Cross story?
It's a 76.
Yeah, we're going full bicentennial.
Because it's horror having a film made about you. I mean, it's as much as it is an honor, and so for it to be a successful endeavor as Andrew managed to make it, it was like, oh yes, it's the greatest. It's 76. Go see it.
The number is right here, 76. That's what I had too.
I think that, Andrew really achieved what he set out to do. I think the idea of Andrew I sort of feel like the film is a primer for people who know nothing about Red Cross. I think Andrew, coming from a television background, had a sort. I mean, although he has a great love of underground music, he also he knows how to bridge that gap between the mainstream and the underground, and or at least that was his goal. And he had this idea of making a film that the person needed to know nothing about us, and yet they would stay awake or not turn it off, or however you want to put it, or even really like it. And I am so impressed because it seems like he's been able to do. I mean, I'm totally ADD. I'm barely finishing this sentence, or it's gonna keep running on, as you'll watch. But you know, and the fact that he's been able to take 45, as of now, 45 years of history, with, you know, some notable moments, and then like make tough decisions. And it's like, you can clean my drunk drawer any day, Andrew. Reich.
That's beautiful.
Oh,
I don't know
my
what
media
the
room, which you said you fantasized about organizing once.
Yeah, I want to get a hold of your records.
My record collection it's like something you would find like in one of those urban explorer houses, abandoned homes closets. Just the closet. The rest of the house is fine.
There's such amazing stuff in there, so poorly treated. It cries out.
Well, we barely even scratched the surface of the movie. It's incredible. By the way, you can go to redcrossfilm.com and get information about upcoming theatrical screenings, when the streaming will be available. Again, I'm scared the third time I see it. The things that have happened to me from watching it already, I'm scared what's going to happen next. I might actually end up like standing behind you or something like.
You'll be radicalized by us as you'll be a member of our cult.
Too late. I'm already in. Thank you all so much. It was so great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to Revolutions Per Movie. We release new episodes every Thursday on your favorite podcast app, and additional bonus episodes every Sunday on our Patreon. The show's a completely independent affair, so the best way to support the show is through our Patreon at patreon.com/revolutionspermovie, where you can get weekly bonus episodes and shows, exclusive limited edition flexi discs and records and CDs featuring guests that have appeared on the show, and other exclusive goods sent to you just for joining. You can follow us on social media at Revolutions Per Movie, and also find out more information about our various guests in the episode show notes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Bye!